This is real life in London over 130 years ago. Not a movie, not a story, but a reality most people were never meant to see. Not the kings, not the queens, not the grand ceremonies or the gilded carriages rolling through decorated streets. What you are about to witness is the raw, unfiltered truth of everyday life in Victorian London. The fog, the filth, the struggle, and the strange, breathtaking beauty of a world that no longer exists. This is 1890s London, and nothing could have prepared you for what it actually looked like. Close your eyes for a moment. Imagine waking up before dawn in a city of 6 million souls. The air is thick, not just with mist, but with coal smoke so heavy it coats your tongue. The streets are already alive, not with cars or electric lights, but with the clatter of iron horseshoes on wet cobblestone, the cry of vendors, a distant moan of foghorns drifting up from the Thames. London never truly slept, it just dimmed.
You step outside and your boots sink into something you do not want to think about. The streets of Victorian London were not cleaned the way you imagine. Horse manure piled in corners, rotting vegetables pushed to the gutters. The smell was something visitors from other countries wrote home about, not with wonder, but with horror. One American journalist described the stench of certain East End streets as something almost alive, something that followed you even after you left, and they had no way out. The city was split into two worlds so different they might as well have been two separate planets. Walk west toward Mayfair or Belgravia, and you enter a place of polished brass door knockers, freshly painted townhouses, and women in elaborate gowns who have never once cooked their own meals. Men in top hats step into private carriages. Gas lamps cast a warm amber glow on clean pavements. Dinner is served at 8. Life here is choreographed, rigid, and carefully perfumed. But walk east, walk toward Whitechapel, walk toward Bethnal Green, walk into the labyrinth of narrow alleys they called the Rookeries, and you enter something else entirely, something the wealthy Londoner and Mayfair preferred to pretend did not exist.
Here, entire families, sometimes 8 people, shared a single room with no window and no heat. Children who had never owned a pair of shoes sold matchsticks on street corners in the freezing November rain. Women took in laundry from sunrise to midnight for wages so small they could barely buy bread. Men who lost factory work disappeared into the public houses and never quite came back. The distance between Mayfair and Whitechapel was less than 5 miles, but the distance in human experience was a lifetime. This was normal for them. Walk with me now through a market morning in the East End. It is 7 in the morning. The light is gray and uncertain, filtered through a sky that has not been truly blue since October. Around you, stalls stretch in every direction. Butchers with carcasses hanging on iron hooks. Fishmongers shouting over crushed ice. Women selling secondhand shoes that still carry the shape of the feet that wore them before. Everything here is traded, repaired, reused, passed down. Nothing is wasted. The poor of Victorian London could not afford waste. But look at the faces. That is what strikes you most when you study the old photographs. Not the poverty itself, but the expressions. There is something behind the eyes, a weariness that does not look like defeat. It looks more like determination, like people who have made a quiet agreement with hardship and decided to keep moving anyway. A girl of perhaps 10 years old carries a basket nearly as big as herself. She is selling watercress, small green bundles for a penny a bunch. She will walk these streets for 8 hours. She will sleep tonight in a room with her mother, her grandmother, and 2 younger brothers, and she will do the same thing tomorrow.
Imagine this was your life. The river is the heartbeat of this city. The Thames in the 1890s was nothing like the waterway you might visit today. It was dark and thick, carrying the waste of millions. Ships from every corner of the British Empire unloaded at the docks, spices from India, timber from Canada, tea from Ceylon. The dock workers who unloaded these ships were among the hardest worked and least paid men in all of London. They gathered each morning before sunrise at the dock gates, hundreds of them, desperate, pressing forward, hoping to be one of the lucky ones chosen for a single day of work. Those not chosen walked home empty-handed. No pay, no explanation, just the long walk back through streets that offered nothing.
And yet, at dusk, when the fog fog rolled in off the water and the gas lamps began to glow on the bridges, there was something about this river that made even the bleakest day feel like it was part of something larger, something ancient, something that could not be broken. The writers felt it. The painters felt it. Even the children playing dangerously close to its muddy banks seemed to sense that this river had witnessed centuries of human struggle and was still here, still moving, still carrying everything forward. And this is where it gets even darker. Then there was the night. Victorian London after dark was a different city altogether. The famous London fog, what locals called the pea souper, swallowed everything. On the worst nights, you could not see your own hand in front of your face. Horses had to be led slowly through the streets. People pressed against walls just to find their direction. Accidents were common and crimes were common. Jack the Ripper had stalked these exact streets just a few years before, 1888, and the memory of it still lived in the nervous glances exchanged between women walking alone after sunset. The fog was not romantic. The fog was terrifying. The police were stretched impossibly thin. One constable might be responsible for streets housing thousands of people. They walked their beats with a lantern and a wooden truncheon, and in the worst neighborhoods, they never walked alone. But even in the darkness, life continued. The pubs glowed with warmth and noise. Music halls drew enormous crowds. Factory workers, seamstresses, the occasional curious gentleman from the wealthy side of the city slumming it for the evening, all packed together, watching comedians, singers, and acrobats for the price of a few pennies. This was their cinema. This was their escape. For 2 hours in a hot, smoky room filled with laughter, the hardness of Victorian life became slightly more bearable, and sometimes, just for a moment, the weight lifted.
But it is the children who haunt you most, the ones who worked in factories from the age of 8, the ones who swept chimneys, their small bodies forced into flues barely wide enough to breathe, emerging black-faced and coughing into air that offered no relief, the ones who sold newspapers until their voices gave out, who ran errands through streets where disease moved as freely as the wind, tuberculosis, typhoid, cholera. These were not distant threats in Victorian London. They were neighbors. Reformers were beginning to fight back. Schools were slowly opening. Laws were painfully, inch by inch, beginning to change. Charles Dickens had already spent decades pressing his pen against the throat of this cruelty and demanding the world look. And slowly, very slowly, the world was beginning to turn its eyes toward what it had preferred not to see. Victorian London was not one city. It was dozens of cities pressed together, breathing the same smoky air but living entirely different lives. The most powerful capital on earth, governing an empire that stretched across a quarter of the globe, while inside its own borders, children starved in alleyways 3 minutes walk from palaces. It was brutal. It was magnificent. It was deeply, painfully human. These people had no idea they were living through history. The girl with the watercress basket, the dock worker who was not chosen, the woman doing laundry by candlelight at midnight. They were not thinking about legacy or memory or what future generations might say. They were thinking about tonight, about whether there would be enough coal to keep the room warm, about whether the cough that started last week was something to worry about making it to morning. They were just trying to survive another day in the most extraordinary, most unforgiving city on earth. And now, more than a century later, we remember them. Not the kings, not the queens, not the names carved into marble, but the faces in the fog, the hands that built this city from nothing and asked for so little in return. This was their world. And for just a moment, it was yours too. A world you would never survive, but one they called home.